Thanks for coming, everyone, and joining us. We're really excited to have you here tonight. My name is Robin Kerr, and I am the co-chair of the Schools Committee for the UVA Club of Washington, D.C. And the Club of Washington, D.C. is for alumni, parents, and friends of the university, and we put on all kinds of programming. We have a sports committee that does game watches. We have a social committee that does Potomac tours, all kinds of different things. And then the schools committee does programming for high school students and their parents and for incoming first years. So we are one of the largest alumni clubs in the world. I think the second largest, with over 50,000 alumni, parents, and friends. So that's a little bit of background about the club. And I also wanted to take a moment to briefly discuss a resource that the university has that a lot of people don't know about, and that is called the College Compass program, obviously very relevant to tonight's topic. But College Compass was created for UVA alumni families with students pursuing the college application process. It does not have any bearing on UVA admissions decisions, but the goal is to help alumni families help their students find a college that is the best fit for them and walk them through the college planning process. So you can check that out at alumni.virginia.edu/college compass. And when I'm done talking, I will put a link to it in the chat so everyone can take a look. With that, I will briefly discuss what we're going to talk about tonight. We're all here to talk about Kickoff to College. As the college admissions process gets more competitive, finding ways to stand out is a must. Our speaker tonight is going to share some insights on the strategy that 8th to 10th grade students can take this school year to kick off their journey to college. And our speaker tonight is Dolin. She's a former public school teacher and author who founded Educational Connections in 1998. The company provides virtual tutoring, executive function coaching, test prep, and college admissions counseling in Maryland, Virginia, DC, and beyond. She and her team specialize in helping students to craft a narrative and a strong high school resume, enabling them to stand out in a very competitive college admissions environment. So she's going to run through her presentation. She will be taking questions at the end. Please put those questions in the chat and she'll take a look and get to them at the end. So with that, I will turn it over to Anne.
Awesome, Robin. Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you tonight. And welcome, parents. I'm so glad that you're here this evening. All right, so as Robin mentioned, we're talking about Roadmap to College, and not just 9th and 10th graders, but really all years of college. High school, what can students do to stand out and to make a difference in their application? Robin mentioned that my name is Ann Dolin, and for 26 years, we've been helping kids to do better in school and to ultimately get into their college, help students get into the college of their choice. But before we start tonight, I want you just to take a moment to imagine what it's like when you apply to school, when you apply to college with your child. You've probably heard, if you haven't been through this before, that it's stressful, it's chaotic, and there's lots of tension between you and your child. But I want to take a step back and think about something different. Imagine if it's not that way at all, and that it's smooth, it's strategic, it's organized, it's efficient, and it's not overly stressful. Well, college admissions can be like that. And that's what we're here to talk about this evening. So let's dive in. I want to first start by talking about the state of college admissions right now. And if you can see this graph, you notice that there's a lot going on with the Common App data. And the Common App is the organization that produces the application that students fill out and send to colleges across the country. If we look at the data from 2019, right before COVID in 2020, we see that students submitted about 2 million applications. But fast forward to 2023, 2024, there's a significant increase, not just significant, but massive, a 65% increase in applications submitted to about 3.4 million. And so it tells us that, kids are submitting more applications than ever before. And it really does make sense in that when colleges went test optional, many before COVID required students to submit SAT and ACT scores. students started to throw their hat in the ring of colleges that they may not have applied to before. And we've seen this trend continue. And so colleges and universities across the country, especially the selective ones, have been overwhelmed by the number of applications they've received. And so as you can imagine, it's become more competitive and acceptance rates have dropped. So we can see here that what's happened at colleges, large flagship schools throughout our area, and schools that many students apply to. You can see at UVA about 51,000 applications submitted last year, which is an increase of 25%. Take a look at JMU, up 52%. And even Tennessee, or many kids had that on their list as maybe a target or a safety school, up 43%. So we're seeing that, kids that thought they could get into a school because they're in the range of a school are realizing that it's a lot more competitive now. And there is a difference between being qualified to attend a school and actually having a competitive college application. So the admissions process is really complex. It is not black and white. And that's why it is important to start early and to really have a thoughtful and strategic process when it comes to college applications. One of the things that we do in my company is to really help kids to think outside the box. And when they're crafting their list, that they don't just have these big flagship schools or even maybe smaller schools, but they're kind of like name brand schools that everybody knows about. We want to encourage kids to look at other schools that they may not have thought about that would be amazing fits for them. For example, one of the majors that a lot of students are interested now is entrepreneurship. And they often think, oh, I need to apply to a great business school. But there's a school in Wellesley, Massachusetts called Babson, which is probably one of the top schools for entrepreneurship throughout the country and even the world. And it's a school that many kids haven't heard about. We often think of finance at UPenn, but the Eli School of Business at Michigan State is highly regarded and it's up and coming. Many kids are taking a look at that school. And then we have a school like Juilliard, which is really top notch for students applying to the arts. But really, schools like Ithaca and the University of Cincinnati that students don't think about can also fit the bill because they're so highly regarded in that area. So, encouraging students to think outside the box, finding schools that align with their intended major, and also, are great fits for social, extracurricular, and cultural opportunities like the schools that they often think about first, their first go-tos. All right, so let's talk about that list. The list is something that can be really complicated to students. When parents call our office looking for help for their kids, they'll often say things like, I don't know if our list is good. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. I'm butting heads with my child over this. We need help. And so we'll have a discussion. Tell me about your child, what's going on, tell me about their history in school, all of those things. But then we'll ask, what schools are you considering? And oftentimes when parents and students sometimes are on the call too, they talk about their list. They are very, very top heavy, meaning that they have a lot of schools on their list that we consider to be reach schools. They're going to be really hard to get into for that student. And so it's important to balance the list by having a smattering of everything. Most likely, we used to call these safety schools, but I think most likely is actually a better term for these schools. These are schools that you have a pretty good chance of getting into. Target schools are kind of right there in the middle. You're in the mid-range and, it could go either way, but you have a good shot. And then reach schools are these schools that are going to be really hard to get into, probably because they have low acceptance rates overall. But often what happens, when we're working with kids on crafting their list, they'll say, oh, I'm just going to apply to this school. I'll just apply to Ole Miss just to have something on my list. But it's not a good idea. We really want kids to have schools, even on their most likely section of the list, that they also love, that they can see themselves at. Every school on that student's list should be a good fit, even a great fit, meaning that it's really a match for them in terms of their major, the cost, the location, the size, the student teacher ratio, the sports programs. All of those things are a fit. Usually our students apply to 7 to 12 schools. I think 12 is a lot personally, but it kind of gives you the range of the number of schools that students are applying to. So that's really the case when kids are looking at schools. They want to see, oh, is this school a good fit for me? Now, on the other hand, colleges are making that determination as well. Is this student a good match for my university or my college? So, what are colleges looking for? A number of factors. First and foremost, it's grades. It really is. What are your grades like? What is your GPA? And not just that, what's the strength of your program? How many AP, IB, or dual enrollment courses have you taken? Have you challenged yourself to take tough classes, especially in areas of interest? We'll talk a little bit about this in just a moment, but test scores. It used to be schools were, when they said test optional, they really were. But most schools now, when they say test optional, that data point of a test score can actually really help with students' applications. And we're seeing now that at many competitive schools, the majority of kids that are getting in are submitting a test score. So test scores are becoming increasingly important. So are essays. And there are two different kinds of essays. There's the Common App essay, and that's the one that's on your main application that gets sent to all the schools. But then each school is going to have, not always, but most, will have their own essays. These are called supplementals. They actually require a lot of work. And they require you doing some research into figuring out, they may ask, why do you want to come to my university? You need to figure out what is it about that university that's a match for you. Not like it has good weather, but what is the program and why? So those are supplemental essays. Letters of recommendation. These are important because educators trust educators. The activities list on your Common App, there's 10 spaces. Sometimes people call this the resume. These are all the things you've done outside of the classroom. And this needs to be really crafted well to define your narrative, which we'll also talk about in just a moment. But that is something that is unique to you. And that is your differentiator that can help you stand out. So let's go there next. What is a narrative? Well, a narrative is something that, again, sets you apart from everybody else. It's something that's special about you. When students are applying to college, they often fall into one of two camps. First, students may know what they want to do. Let's take a student who maybe wants to go into engineering as a career. And this student has done everything, leading up to this. They've loved engineering. They've taken high-level math and science classes. They've participated in their school's robotics club. Over the summer, they job shadowed at an engineering firm. And maybe they write their essay on something related to what makes them tick, this love of theirs in engineering. It doesn't have to be. You can write your essay on something different. Maybe you've struggled with ADHD, but you've found a way to overcome it. That can be perfectly fine too. But that the sense that you are an engineering kid is part of your narrative. On the other hand, sometimes kids come, and this is so normal, and it's perfectly okay. We often expect 17-year-olds to know what they want to do for the rest of their lives, and they do not, and it's fine. But they can still have a differentiator. Now, it makes me think of this student that one of our counselors, we have 6 counselors on staff, and one of them, Kristen, she actually worked at UVA as an evaluator for 11 years. And she was working with a student who they had their first meeting and they were talking, tell me about school, blah, blah. And she said, tell me about what you love to do. Tell me something special about you. And he's like, oh, you know what, honestly, there's nothing unique about me. I'm kind of just average. I'm like kind of run of the mill. And she said, oh, well, what do you like to do on weekends? It's like, oh, I love to fly fish. Turns out, after much discussion, that this student was so passionate about fly fishing that he actually had created this lure, and he crafted this lure on his own. He built a number of them and he was selling them on Etsy. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That is so cool. That is definitely unique to you. He ended up writing his essay about this lure business that he created. Through much exploration and working together, he also decided that he wanted to seek out entrepreneurship. So he decided he wanted to go into business. And this was a student, again, who came to the table saying, I'm just an average kid. And I will tell you, nobody is average. There is something unique about every child. That's for sure. So when we think about, what is your uniqueness and you don't know, we have an assessment we use called AchieveWorks. And I really like using this with kids because it assesses three things: personality, their skills, what they're naturally good at, and then their learning and productivity. And based on this information, it will populate information on careers and possible majors that align with the student's natural interests and also their natural skill set. And for some kids that come to the table saying, I'm just a normal kid, they're like, oh my gosh, I always thought I was good at that, but I never thought I could make it a career. Or, oh, I can see how that would fit with me. And it's often eye-opening to kids to realize they do have a uniqueness. So your uniqueness can be a part of the essays you write. Again, as I mentioned, there's two kinds of essays. The Common App has 7 different prompts. You do not need to write all 7, but you're going to pick one. And this is the one you want to work on a lot. It needs to be technically correct, that's for sure, but you also need to pick the right topic. And that is really key. So working with somebody to make sure, the technically correct part, honestly, is the easy part. The harder part is, do I have the right topic? Is this going to set me apart? And that's key. So that's the Common App. Then there's the supplemental. And as I mentioned, these vary by school. And so it's important to go back to the school's website, look to see what is their mission, what's unique about this program, and finding ways to link. For example, if the question is, what will you bring to this university? It needs to be specific. It may also be related to the program that you're applying to. Maybe you're applying to the nursing program. They also have their own supplemental essay. It needs to be something along those lines. But this is your real chance to show what's special about you, because other kids can have similar GPAs. They can have similar test scores. They can take similar courses, but no one's going to have your essay. That's for sure. So those are the essays, and those can also help you stand out. So we talked a little bit about your narrative. We talked about grades. Let's talk a little bit about the courses that you choose. And this is really important. And I think it's probably one of the most overlooked things when kids are in middle school and when they really start their high school career and actually in 8th grade, planning for 9th grade. We often just think, oh, I'm just going to take the course that's next, or I'll just take the course that I think I should take. But certainly you want to take courses that interest you. But ideally, if you want to go into a STEM field, you're kind of mapping out, okay, if I take algebra in this grade, what's my trajectory going to be for the rest of high school? If I take Spanish 1 here, what's that going to look like? Because the rigor matters to colleges, especially the selective ones. So anytime you can be strategic about course selection, and not just your core courses, you think you might want to go into business, take a marketing elective as an example. Think about those as you plan out your courses. Also, course selection for the senior year is really, really important. And a lot of times kids think, oh, I'm doing my applications over the summer. I'm going to submit them by November 1st. No one's going to see my senior year grades, but that's actually not true. Schools will see the courses you're enrolled in. And if you get deferred or you get waitlisted, you can submit your grades and they may ask for your grades. So it's really important not only to have the right courses, but to do well in them your senior year. Another factor that's important is something that's called demonstrated interest. Demonstrated interest means to a college that you really like them and that you really want to go there. Um, some colleges consider demonstrated interest quite a bit. Some not so much. Like UVA, they don't track that, but smaller liberal arts schools and some larger flagship schools really care a lot about it. So when the college rep comes to your school on a visit, sign up for a meeting. Absolutely go and meet with that college representative. If you have an opportunity, which you do, to get on the college's email list, their marketing list, sign up. Absolutely. And when you get those emails, open them up. Some colleges have tracking software that they can see, not just are you on our list, but are you interested in us? Did you open up the email? Did you click around? Did you visit these programs? That shows them that you're interested. Attend college fairs, really important. And don't just walk around, but get the QR code. And when you go to the booth, have that person scan it because they keep track. A lot of times, not always, depending on the school, but often the representative at the college fair who comes for your, say Fairfax County, they may be the person that reviews the applications at like Madison High School in Vienna. And so if you have an opportunity to meet that person, say hello, tell them that you're really interested in their school, get their card. You can even follow up with a thank you note. Great to meet you. Those things can make a difference. You can sign up for interviews. There aren't a lot of schools these days that offer interviews, but some still do. For example, William and Mary and Christopher Newport, they go fast. So when you see that they come out, sign up quickly. And that's a huge factor that you've taken your time to drive to Williamsburg and have an interview. So those are all ways that you show the school demonstrated interest. Now, again, some schools care a lot about this, some not so much. But you can see on their website if this matters to them. Another factor, which is, I think, probably the ultimate demonstrated interest, is when you apply early decision. There are three ways you can apply to college. You can apply early decision, you can apply early action, and both of these are typically a November 1st deadline, or you can apply regular decision. And usually that's like a January 15th or so deadline. So if you apply early decision, you're saying to the school that you apply early decision, if I get accepted to your school, I will absolutely go. And in fact, it's a binding agreement. So you have to go. So sometimes kids, they realize you have a better chance at most universities of getting in early decision. So they often find the school that they love more than anything in the world, and they really want to go there, and they apply early decision. Not everybody does. And a lot of times you don't know if you absolutely want to go there. And I will say, just from experience and working with lots of kids, but even my own kids, what they think in the spring of their junior year can be completely different by the fall of their senior year. So things change a lot. The other thing that has become an increasing factor in admissions is testing. That's the SAT and ACT. I mentioned earlier that, during COVID, the schools really, didn't care either way whether you submitted a test. But now they do because of grade inflation. And so many kids are, have really good grades. And a lot of kids are taking similar classes. they need another data point. And that comes in the form of an SAT or ACT. You may have seen a lot of information in the news about changes. Perhaps you saw some of these headlines. You know, it started out with schools like Harvard, Yale, and Brown saying, you know what, we're bringing back tests. We're going to be test required now. And it may be that those schools you don't care about because your child's not going to apply to those schools. But typically, what happens in admissions is once these really big competitive schools start a trend, others will follow. And that's exactly what's happened here. We're seeing lots of changes. For example, it's in Georgia. It started out with their two most competitive schools, University of Georgia and Georgia Tech, going test required. Now, four more of their schools said test required. All the schools in Florida, the public university, is test required. Even schools like Purdue. I mentioned Tennessee earlier. You know, they're receiving so many applications. They want to see a test score now. Even LSU, Louisiana State, they are requiring tests as well. So we're seeing that shift. We're also seeing changes in the tests themselves. And you probably heard about the SAT going from pencil and paper and the Scantron booklet to now it's digital and it's online and it's also adaptive. We'll talk about that too. But also the ACT just had a major announcement and they're doing a complete overhaul in 2025. So let's break through some of the differences in these tests and start to think a little bit more strategically about test taking. There are pros and cons of submitting tests. Sometimes kids will say to us, hey, I heard that George Mason is test optional. I'm not even going to study. I'm not even going to take a test. But wait a second, you have other schools on your list and things are changing so quickly. You don't know what it's going to be like next year. And if you have a good score, that may help you a lot at George Mason. So here are the pros. It provides the school another data point. For example, I went to Boston College. I was at a panel a few months ago, the rep from Boston College, from University of Colorado, University of Florida, and University of Tampa. And they were talking about the need for this data. And the rep from Boston College said, you know, we're technically cost test optional, but we really need to see data. We're such a popular school. If we don't see data, a test score, we're wondering why. So it shows initiative. And students can use their test scores selectively. They don't have to, you know, they get a test score. It doesn't mean they have to send it to all the schools they're applying to. Typically what happens is they'll look at the ranges for a school, and if they're in the range, they'll send it to that school. But maybe not every school, especially their reach schools, they're going to send it to their scores to, and that's okay. But they may send their scores to all the schools in their target group, and they may send them to schools absolutely that are in their most likely. So you've got to use your test scores selectively. Furthermore, test scores are required for a lot of merit-based aids. So cons, one less data point. For example, at UVA, about 75% of students who were admitted last year submitted a test score. So it tells us that, you know, testing is becoming more commonplace and important in admissions decisions. If you don't submit a test score, and that can be okay too, but it just means there's going to be greater scrutiny on other parts of your application, like grades, essays, and extracurriculars. So let's dive into both of these tests because parents and kids often have questions. Are they the same? Are they different? Do schools care which test you submit? So let's take a look at this new SAT. It's the digital version. It's considered to be a power test. And that means it requires a little bit of thinking to answer the questions. Sometimes kids will say, I wasn't sure what they were asking me on that question, or it took a minute for me to understand what I should do here. So there aren't as many questions as on the ACT, but they do require critical thinking. And the difficulty on this test is actually in the interpretation or in the analysis. On the other hand, the ACT is a speed test. You have to go at a pretty fast clip in order to get through each section. So there are more questions, they're shorter questions, they're a little bit easier to understand, they're more straightforward, and students will often say, oh, like these questions are more like school. I understood them better. But the difficulty on this test is in the pacing and in the speed. What's important to know is that schools do not have a preference. It's not like, you know, parents often say, oh, if my child wants to apply to University of Wisconsin, should they submit the ACT or SAT? Which test do they like best? It doesn't matter. Schools hold them both in the same regard. So you can pick either test and submit it. In fact, when we talk about preparation a little bit later, it's important to know that if you're going to prepare and take a test, which we highly, highly recommend, that you pick one test and you stay in that lane instead of splitting your focus. So when it comes to the ACT, there are some major changes. They were actually acquired by a private equity firm, and they were struggling to compete with the SAT, the College Board. And so they've also seen what happened with the change on the SAT, and they've said, okay, we want to make our own changes, but ours are going to be different. So here's what's the same. Just like the SAT, which was about 3 hours, now they're going to move their 3 hour test to a 2 hour test. They're going to have fewer questions per section, and they're going to give kids more time per question. So they're going to be more like the SAT. They're going to take away that issue with the pacing and are going to allow kids more time to figure out each question, because that was the complaint for a lot of students. They're going to give shorter passages instead of these really long passages with many questions. They're shorter passages. They'll have the same 36-point scale, but the calculation, instead of being on 4 sections, which it is now, it has English, math, reading, and science. The science is going to become optional, and there's going to be a composite score based on just those 3 sections. I was on a webinar with one of the reps from the ACT, and he was saying that they're going to also have a STEM score, which is the science score and the math score, for kids that want to take the science. And, you know, they're looking for really sending that off to colleges. So these new changes will debut in September of 2025. So that's the ACT. And I will mention that, you know, one of the things parents think about and kids about the SAT is, unlike the ACT currently, those 4 sections, the SAT is half math and half reading and writing. So for kids that don't love math, sometimes they will go the ACT route because it's only a quarter of the test. So when it comes to testing, we recommend that kids take the test 2 or 3 times. And that what you don't want to do is take it once and just like not have a plan around it. You really need to have a testing plan. And we recommend pairing test dates. That means you're going to pick the first time you're going to take one of the tests, and then you're going to pick another date too. So for example, let's say, you know, you're a senior and you want to take, or junior, sorry, you want to take an October test and a December test. And the reason you do that is that you're going to prep, take it in October, get your scores back. It usually takes about 2 weeks. Look at your scores, and with a tutor or, you know, whomever you're working with, or by yourself, you're going to look at your weak areas, see where you need to improve, prep some more, and then you take it again. And then you can decide if you want to take it 3rd time. But that's what pairing test dates looks like. Now, I've seen a trend. I've been doing this. We've been in business for 26 years. And I'd say in the last maybe like 5 to 8 years, there's been a trend to take the test early and often. So, you know, it used to be that every kid took it in the spring of their junior year. And now more kids are taking it in the fall of their junior year, which is fine. But statistically speaking, your score peaks in the spring of your junior year for a number of reasons. You're older, you're more mature, you've had more time in class, and if you prepare, you have more time to prepare. So sometimes kids will take it in the fall, and then they may take it again for the third time in the spring. But I would recommend get help with the testing plan. Just don't go into it blindly. We're happy to help you. I'll give you my contact information at the end. We do this with kids all the time. We help them plan out what their testing schedule is going to look like. The other thing that's a common question is, when should I start test prep if I do decide to prepare for a test, and how long does it take? We recommend about 2 to 4 months out. um, what's helpful is in the Mid-Atlantic, and I know we're all in DC, but the SAT, the College Board, has a stronghold in this area. So, the ACT isn't as popular. And for that reason, kids have a lot of experience with the PSAT. Sometimes they take it in ninth grade, but they definitely take it in 10th grade and 11th grade. And oftentimes, kids that do well on it will say, oh, I'm so familiar with the PSAT. I know the SAT is kind of similar. I'm just going to go in that direction. And so when they call to get test prep, we'll talk to them about the options of the SAT and ACT. But sometimes the parent will call and say, like, we're just going down the route of the SAT because this is what my child's comfortable with. Sometimes parents will say, my child did okay on the PSAT. They took a practice SAT on the College Board website, the Blue Book test, and they did fine. But we're kind of wondering, maybe the ACT would be a better option. Maybe they'd score better there. And so we'll have them take the practice ACT, we'll put it into a concordance table, and we'll give them our recommendation. What happens when you compare an SAT to an ACT score is that about a third of students will perform better on one than the other, and it's pretty clear. And so for that third of kids, they should absolutely go in that direction. Maybe they do better on the ACT. That's the test they should go for. But for about 2/3 of students, it's honestly a toss-up. And then it really comes down to personal preference. And we go with that. So we work with kids online. I love online for test prep because it's really flexible. Students these days are so busy. Adding one more thing to their plate feels like a lot. So we want to make it as flexible and as easy as possible. But it does take a commitment. It does take time to practice before the test. Sometimes parents ask, what does that look like? And we do weekly sessions. There's a little bit of homework in between. And I found that to be better than trying to cram in something like a boot camp right before the test. That we used to do those years ago. They don't really work when we looked at the data. So there's lots of options to prep. You can go to Barnes and Noble and get a good old fashioned workbook. You can do something online. You can take a group. You can do it one-to-one. We find a one-to-one to be the most helpful, to be the fastest, most efficient, and to boost scores the most compared to other measures. But there's lots of options for kids out there, that's for sure. So this is a little bit about our program. What I would say is, whatever you decide to do, there are three things that have to happen for kids. They have to have practice with strategy. Strategy means, if I'm about to approach a math problem that I don't know how to do, how am I gonna tackle it? Maybe the strategy is to work backwards. That's an example. So part of it is strategy. How do I approach these? Part of it is content. And I will say that a lot of kids in the writing section, which is a lot of grammar, they don't know grammar rules. They've also forgotten a lot of the formulas in geometry. So content would be going back and practicing the subject material, or if they're in algebra 2, making sure that they have a really good sense of that content. And then the third part of any test prep strategy is to take simulated tests under standardized conditions. So that means you want to be able to, we will assign them to kids, but we want a student to sit for 2 hours and take a practice SAT as an example under time conditions. The reason this is helpful is it helps with your endurance, it helps with your level of stress, so that when you go to the actual test, you've been there, you've done that, you know what it feels like, and you're ready. I'd also recommend that students only use retired tests from the College Board or the ACT, that they do not just go online and find some random test that somebody wrote. It needs to be the actual material. I'll also say the new digital SAT, the math is pretty tough. So when you go online, you'll see different versions. 1, 2, and 3 seem to have easier math than 4, 5, and 6. So we encourage kids to work from those tests. But anyways, you can find more information at ectutoring.com/test-prep. All right, so let's dive into what kids should do at each grade level. And then we're going to wrap up and go to questions. If you're a senior right now, it's go time. You know, this is your time to complete your Common App, to refine your essays, to keep track of deadlines, and to make sure you get most of what you're doing submitted by November 1st or on time in January. Now, for juniors, what should you be doing? You should be focused on your grades. You need to have a solid SAT or ACT testing plan. You want to create and refine your college list, and you want to make sure your list is balanced. That means you need to have a smattering of schools in each of the 3 categories I talked about. You need to strategize your resume, which means what you're going to do outside of school. So what will you be doing over the summer? It seems like so ridiculously early to think about the summer. It really does. But a lot of programs that kids will apply for, the deadline dates are in December. So it's not too early to think ahead. Sometimes kids have high expectations that they're going to get an internship or something fancy. It's hard to get those, but you can do a job shadow. You can volunteer. You can work. Schools highly regard kids that work, have a job scooping ice cream. It's okay if it's not related to your major. The fact that you took initiative, you got a job, you learned to get along with others, that's a great thing. And then you can also be planning ahead for your visits and your interviews. And then younger students, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, those are the kids that should be focused on course mapping and lining out what are they going to take each year. They're focused on their grades. Of course, they're thinking about their extracurriculars in summer. But I will say, you know, often we think, oh my God, these kids are so young. Don't worry about it. There are 2 kinds of students and parents in college admission. Kids that let the process control them because they've started too late and it's complete panic mode, or people that have controlled it. And I'd say that being in that camp of controlling it is much better. And so if you start early and you plan ahead, it really does give you more control. I've put everything together for you. So I've listed out what you should be doing in 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And you can get that by going to our website, which is ectutoring.com/college-consulting. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of that page, you'll see the checklist, and just you can click to download it. And that you can print it out, you can keep it, whatever. But this is a really nice way to think about, you know, to think ahead. So those are some things that you can be doing as you get ready. If you have an anxious child, I want to mention that we have a really great webinar coming up about anxiety for older students, for high school students. And if this, you know, is something that would benefit your child, I know it's coming up right around the corner. It's on Friday at 2. But if you register, we'll send you the recording if you can't make it. And that's one of our executive function coaches, Rachel Moss, who's amazing. And you can find more information for that on that at ectutoring.com/webinar-series. So I'd love to go to Q&A. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. I already see a bunch of them in there. I'm going to go to that in a second. But if we can help you in any way, we're happy to schedule a call to talk to you about your child. Just you can scan this QR code. You can go to our website. You can learn more about our college counseling. And it's a strategy call to talk about a testing plan, college, whatever you want to talk about. We'll share our information on our services. But even if you decide to go at it on your own, you're still going to get tidbits that will absolutely help your child. All right, so let me take a look at Q&A and see what questions we have. Oh, it looks like there aren't any questions. Hold on. I know I must be doing something wrong.
And they're actually in the Q&A box. We
Oh,
had to move from the chat to the Q&A box. So a
okay.
good reminder for everyone on the line as well. If you have any questions, please put them in that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen instead of in the chat.
All right. Here I see it now. All right. Do colleges consider AP scores on AP exams? And the answer is yes. And thank you for that question. Um, so a lot of times kids will take AP classes, but they won't really study or prepare for an exam. And it's not a good idea because if you're applying to a competitive school, if you're applying to a school that's kind of easy to get into, it totally doesn't matter. But if you're applying to a school where lots of kids have really good grades and you have a good AP score, that can really, really help you. So it's not just about taking the class, but it's also doing well on that exam. And it absolutely counts, especially if you're taking an AP class um, related to what you want to study in college. Is the summer before ninth grade too early to do test prep? And yes, you really don't want to do test prep too far out because the questions are going to be really hard for the student because they haven't covered it yet. And you don't want it to be really disillusioning for your child and them to feel defeated. So I would say the best thing to do is to think about if your child's going to take the test for the first time the fall of their junior year, you could start preparing over the summer. The summer before the junior year would be a great time to get started. Should we seek out specific college summer programs at camps at the schools that my child is interested in? If it's just a camp, for example, both of my kids went to a William and Mary golf camp, and one of them thought, "Oh my God, this is going to help me to get into William and Mary," and not really. um, they also went to after this camp, there was an add-on to do an academic portion. Those types of things, not so much. But if it's you know a specific program to that university and there's an admissions process and it's a big deal, those types of things can be regarded, but it really does depend on the university. Some universities see that and count that and think it's helpful, others not so much. So I would look at the university and see if that's a factor. You can also reach out to admissions. They're real people just like all of us, and it's okay to contact admissions and ask questions that you have to. If I want to hire somebody to help me with the application process, what should we look for to demonstrate they're effective? I think what's helpful is if the person has actually worked in admissions. As I mentioned, we have 6 counselors on staff, and they've all sat on that side of the table where they've looked at students' applications and they've made decisions as to whether they're going to admit, decline, waitlist, defer. And so you want somebody who has been in admissions and who understands what colleges are looking for. I think that's key, and who has had a lot of experience working with students like yours, depending on their need. Sometimes kids are applying to international schools. Sometimes kids are applying to play a sport at that school. So those types of things are important as well. What's better, an AP or dual enrollment class for a STEM-focused child? And I was at a workshop, and I can't even remember who answered this from one of the colleges. It was somebody in admissions, and I can't remember right now. And they said, it kind of depends on where the student is coming from. They said sometimes with dual enrollment classes, you're not always so sure about the professors, and the quality of the class. Whereas AP is AP, and you're also taking a test. So this person seemed to think AP was favorable, but it's probably a toss up. And, if your school's only offering dual enrollment, then it doesn't matter because that's your only choice. But it could be AP. It could be both. It could be either one. I have a student. How can a student with significant learning challenges and subsequently low test scores demonstrate exponentially harder that how they've had to work so much harder than typically developing peers? Will colleges write these students off due to lower test scores by virtue of learning challenges? What's the best way to help my child put herself forward in spite of learning significant challenges? I love that question. Thank you for asking that. Look, if your child, they come in, they take a practice test, and their scores are so far below and not at all in line with where they want to go to college, your child may be somebody that doesn't even take a test and they're just going to apply test optional. It's perfectly fine. Um, we've worked with so many kids over the years that that's what they write their essay on because they've had to overcome so much to be in the position they're in, to get the grades they get, to do the extracurriculars they get. These are phenomenal kids. And when they get the opportunity to explain that in their essay, it's really, really powerful. So, you know, anytime you've overcome something, that's a great topic for an essay. But specifically in overcoming a learning disability, we have lots of kids that write on their ADHD. That's a way that you can let colleges know. Because, you know, if you get, for example, you get extra time on the SAT or ACT, schools don't see that accommodation and they don't see that you've had, you know, been in special education or that you've had a 504 and IEP. They don't see that. So the essay is the way to talk about that if that's what you know, if that is part of what got you to the point you are now. How would a school look at a student engaged in a really good academic cultural summer program if this program has nothing to do with their intended major? Would this show initiative and well-roundedness? And the answer is absolutely. You know, there's so many cool things that kids do that have nothing to do with their majors. And they've just loved doing that. So absolutely, I think that is great. And, you know, again, that's something that is different. It's unique. It's not like you're a one-trick pony and this is all you do. There's other things that are interesting about you. What are your thoughts on applying early decision versus early decision two versus regular admission? Will you be different to regular if you don't get in early decision? Hi, Sarah. It depends on the school. Like some schools, like American, for example, their early decision, like kids that get into early decision are, it's so far beyond the regular decision that, you know, a lot of kids will just go that route. But a lot of very competitive schools, they they don't bring a lot of kids in through early decisions. So those kids end up getting deferred into the regular application. And often they're very strong candidates, so they may eventually get in, but there's more likely to be a deferral. So honestly, it depends on the school for sure. What's better, a B in an honors class or an A in a regular class? A B in an honors class, or even better, a B in an AP class. Again, schools look at the rigor. So anytime you can take the opportunity to challenge yourself, that's absolutely a good thing. How important is it to be well-rounded if your student excels in one thing? For example, a student athlete with limited time for many additional things. Zara, it's okay. You know, a lot of kids, they love their sport so much that this is what they do and it takes up a lot of their time. That being said, they can take leaderships in their sport. They can, you know, maybe they're the team captain or the co-captain, or maybe if they're a soccer player, they've organized a shoe drive, a cleat drive to get kids to bring their used cleats for disadvantaged kids. That shows initiative and that's within their sport. And it's something that can help show that they're a leader and they're doing things outside of their sport as well, even though it's related. Let's see. My highly motivated eighth grader wants to graduate from high school in 3 years. Do you think this will negatively impact their chance of getting into a competitive college? Thank you. I don't know about that. Most public schools I know don't allow that in this area. but it might be the students at a private school, an independent school, and that's okay. I'm not sure. It might help at college, it might not. But I guess the other thing I would think about is now the student's going off to college at 17, and that might feel that I know it's only 1 year, but that 1 year is a big difference when you're thinking about the maturity of kids. And so for that reason, I think, staying in high school for 4 years could be a good thing. And I'm not sure, it depends on the college, if 3 years would make a big difference. But on the other end, it could make a big difference with maturity. Are there places on applications these days to explain leadership roles they've had outside of one role they may want to emphasize on their essay? Wouldn't want to dilute the essay. We talk about too many things, but I don't want to overlook really good leadership activities. And Jennifer, the answer is yes. There's a section on the Common App for activities, and there's 10 spaces. And you can fill all of them out, or you can just fill a lot of them out, or most of them out. But really what you want to do is take time to work on that. And what I would recommend is and it can't be before ninth grade, but starting in ninth grade, if you have a chance, even on the notes part of your phone, as your child does something meaningful, just keep a record of it. Sometimes when kids are, they're working on their applications, they're like, oh, I can't remember. What was that thing? So just keep a list of it. And when they go to do their applications, you want to put the more meaningful things that they spent the most time at the top. And be strategic about it. Don't put like random things that they didn't spend that much time on that they're not really interested in. Really think about what you're putting there, but that's where it would go there. So I hope that's helpful. All right, Robin, I think we're done with questions.
Yes, it looks like we are. Thank you so much. And to everyone that is still on the line, Jen has been putting links to wonderful resources from Anne and her team in the chat, so please check those out. And in case you missed it at the beginning, I'm going to put in a link to the chat for a resource that UVA offers for alumni families. It provides help with the college application process. So I am going to put that in the chat. And then also, if you enjoyed tonight's event and you'd like to come to other DC Who's events, please check out our website, putting that in the chat as well. Anna's coming back and doing another event with us in November. So if you'd like to come back and see her again, it's on a different topic, but she will be here in November, and you can find the details about that on our website. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful night, and thank you so much again.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening. Bye-bye. Thanks, Robin.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye.